Fellow tennis nerds, I hope all is well. I'm here with Will today, a buddy of mine after a really awesome trip we had to San Luis Obispo, where we met Tennis Warehouse. We tried loads and loads of gear, but his expertise is not in gear, it's in doubles play. He's a doubles specialist. He works with, Olympic teams and USTA, so this guy knows doubles as well as anyone. And we're going to talk doubles, but we're also going to talk about other stuff today. Will Boucek, founder of Tennis Tribe, how are you today, man?
I'm doing good. Excited to chat with you today, and hopefully we can provide some good stuff for the audience.
I hope so. I hope so. I know almost nothing about doubles. Well, I play a bit. I play a few tournaments here and there. But how did you
Yeah.
decide on? Like I asked you this before for a short that's coming up. But how did you decide like doubles is your thing? Like what was the thing? You played D3 college, as far as I
Yeah.
remember, but you went into doubles later on.
Yeah. How did I become a doubles nerd?
Yeah.
Um, so I played growing up a good bit off and on. Played Division III college, which is not super high level, but was still playing in college. And then in 2015, I moved to Austin, Texas, and I didn't really know a lot of people there. So I used USTA tennis leagues as a way to just start meeting people. And I started playing a lot of doubles, as you do in those adult leagues. And I just became fascinated by the strategy. I'd started like trying different things on the court with my positioning and movement and shot selection. And then I would like watch my friends play, and I'd be like, why are they hitting it there? Like, that doesn't seem like the right strategy. So I had a background in web design and marketing and built a website and started a double strategy newsletter. So I would do a new lesson every couple of weeks when I had time. And then at these tournaments, I'd ask my friends, can I add you to my newsletter? And then over time, after a year or so, people started coming up to me at the tournaments and saying, your blog has helped my doubles game so much. So at that point, I realized like, oh, maybe I am pretty good at this. Like, I guess a lot of people don't think about this strategy stuff, and I'm constantly thinking about it. So I've found a way to like kind of articulate some of these lessons in a way that resonates with people. And then I continued to do that for several years. In 2020, I started the podcast and started interviewing pro doubles players and coaches. In 2021, I went to Indian Wells for the first time. It was in October that year. And I walked around the grounds and I realized, like, I went to one of the doubles matches, and I think I watched like Nikola Mektic and Mate Pavic or something. And at the time, they were maybe the best doubles team in the world. And I was like, why have most like recreational club tennis players never heard of these guys when, of course, they all know who Djokovic is or Alcaraz is or whoever was number one at the time. Um, and it didn't make sense to me that professional doubles, I didn't think it necessarily had to be more popular than singles. I don't think it needs to be like a rivalry thing, but it should be more popular than it is. And since then, I've kind of been looking for a reason that it's not as popular as I think it should be. And I'm helping to try to promote professional doubles, help make it become more popular. And then I'm also still focused very much on the strategy side. So through the podcast, I got to know a lot of professional doubles teams and players. I learned how to gather data and use analytics and statistics from Craig O'Shaughnessy at Brain Game Tennis, Warren Pretorius, who runs a company called Tennis Analytics. They helped me kind of learn the strategy and analytics side. And I've been doing that with pro doubles teams for 2 or 3 years now as well. Worked with a couple teams at the Olympics this year. Worked with a Davis Cup team last week as well. And then I'm still doing the club level lessons every week through the newsletter. And actually just launched a new membership last week for that as well. So it's been a really long journey, but I've gotten to where I've kind of carved myself a little niche here on the doubles side of tennis, because I feel like it's really just an underserved market overall.
Yeah, it is. And I think several of the guys I've talked to recently, I had a coach that I talked to yesterday, Oscar Torres, and I had Connor Casey on, and they both talk very highly of doubles. These are two ex-pros,
Mhm.
right? Like, and not necessarily doubles pros because usually people make a distinction, but they're ex pros.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the truth that most people play doubles when they get a bit older. Like that is the main thing people do. And it's a bit
Mm-hmm.
weird, you would argue, that it's like, why doesn't it break through to also TV viewership? Because that is the reality they have. Like if they play tennis 5 times a week, like my father does, for example, he plays solely almost doubles. Like he plays some singles tournaments, but it's mainly doubles. So that is a bit strange. Why do you think that is? Like that it doesn't translate from where they play to how they watch it.
Yeah, I think the big thing is people like to watch stars, right? They like to follow a storyline and watch the stars. And the stars right now are all on the singles tour. Um, the reason for that, I believe, is because the singles tour gets the majority of the marketing dollars and the TV coverage and all these different things. And by majority, I mean like 99.5%, maybe more than that. So I think I think that's one of the big problems. Excuse me. So it's kind of like a chicken or the egg problem. So if the tours were to invest, say, 10% of their marketing budget in doubles, doubles would certainly become more popular. But at the same time, they don't want to invest in something that's not making them money right now, right? Because that would be a bad business decision. So like, do they need to invest in it for it to make money, or does it need to prove that it can make money first and then they'll invest in it? And that's the kind of question that a lot of people debate, and I've had debates with people over the years. Another aspect of this is the doubles players need to do as much as they can to promote themselves on their own. So the obvious examples, the Bryan brothers were the best at this. I remember talking with Ben Rothenberg about this on my podcast at the very beginning of 2024, and he talked about how the Bryans, after they would finish a match, they would stay on court signing every single autograph, and they'd stay out there for hours, and they never turned down a media request, interview, and they just did everything they could to build their brand. And of course, it helps that they were, both from the same country, both American. They were the best team, all that stuff as well. But I think the doubles players should try to focus on, building their own social media following, building their own brand, getting their own story out there. And if the tours can come along and help, that would add even more fuel to the fire. And then I think you would create that kind of TV demand for it.
I agree. I think also, I mean, it's obviously the chicken and the egg is kind of the a typical thing for any business, right? Like, where do you?
Mm-hmm.
But you also have to believe in something, and you have to experiment. So from like the ATP and from the organizations running professional tennis, you need to experiment. See, like, how can we? Because there's an interest in playing. Why is there maybe not as much interest? So they must have these discussions. And the issue which we discussed yesterday on the pod was like there is like so much focus on 10 guys, pretty much like 10 guys, maybe 10 women, or fewer even, so the
Yeah.
break point, all this, they pick like 5 6 people that are already established pros, and they follow their lives, while the more interesting stories are maybe in the top 100, top 200, top 300, I don't know, even if we talk singles, right? So they're not
Mm-hmm.
really looking like outside that top 15 guys because they already have an established name. But I think if you look for the better stories and the more interesting personalities, you need to look a bit beyond that and try to make like,
Mm-hmm.
because challenger tennis is also great. I look at Carousel, for example, he's now top 300 in the world. He has already a big YouTube following. So he has made his own marketing, you could argue. He doesn't get any help from the organizations. So I
Mm-hmm.
think there's definitely that's the way to do it if you cannot get anything. But I think that the big organizations should also make it easier for players on the lower level. Like look for some, like maybe try a few challenger players, a few doubles players, give them the spotlight for a week or a day or whatever, and then see what happens. Because I think it's a
Mm-hmm.
little bit boring when they always focus on like it's only Sinner, it's the top 10, and then on WTA also the top 10. So it gets a bit repetitive.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't thought a lot about that, but that makes sense. I feel like the lower level players, if you take somebody ranked 200 or 300, or a doubles player who's ranked like 60 or whatever, because they don't have all of that popularity, they don't have the money, um they also probably have a lot less kind of PR training. Um, Whereas, like, I think we talked about this when we were out in California. Like, when I have a media credential at a tournament, a lot of times I just don't go to like very many of the press conferences because they give you like these players have such good PR training. Like they just give you kind of the generic answers that they're trained to tell you, and you don't learn any real good information from them. You don't get to see, who actually is this person. Whereas some of those 250 ranked players or lower ranked doubles players, or even a lot of the higher ranked doubles players, don't have that same kind of wall in front of them, right? They're willing to kind of open up and be themselves, and you'll probably get, like you said, a more interesting story out of that.
Yeah, I think PR training can be a negative for the outcome of interesting stories and honesty and stuff. I understand, like, if some player
Hmm.
starts yapping about stuff that's not good for his
Yeah,
publicity, whatever, for his personal brand, but that's really up to him. And I think, like,
yeah,
having gone to many of these press conferences, it's like you do get bored to death. And the questions from a lot of the press, the established press people there,
yeah,
are really boring as well, right? So it's like, it's just you get a boring
yeah.
question and you get a boring reply back, and nobody wins. Like, tennis definitely loses because there's nothing to build a story around. Like, there's nothing, and it doesn't have to be
Hmm.
gotcha journalism. It could be something a bit more personal, but it's something to think about for the sport. I think if there's something we can
Hmm.
improve there, or make it more engaging. I mean, they're trying from the ATP with some like social media stories. We've seen a little bit maybe more engaging stuff, but I still think they're a bit far behind when it comes to like growing the game.
Hmm. Yeah, I totally agree.
So in doubles, and like if we look at other sports, we played pickleball, and I noticed like you are a good strategist also in pickleball. You figured out like, okay, I have to do this. You don't play a lot of pickleball, I figured, but you still like, you look keen on the game. But in doubles, is strategy even more important than in singles, you would say?
I think so, just because you have more variables on the court. So you have to account for three other players rather than just one other player. Um, So maybe not, maybe it's not more important, but it's certainly more complicated. It's certainly more complex. It might also be more important, but it's definitely more complex. So you're having to account for just more variables on the court. So when I'm hitting a particular shot, I have to, be aware of the other side of the net, not just where you are at the baseline, but where your partner is at the net and what their tendencies are. Do they like to move a lot towards the middle? So I need to go down the line or lob them at times. So you're just taking into account a lot more different factors.
It's also interesting in doubles, I find, with like how the different personalities work together, right? So now we had Davis Cup, where I would say the doubles get quite a nice spotlight, because it's like the deciding
Hmm.
doubles match. I
Hmm.
think that is optimal for like a team format, is to have the doubles as the decider. I think it puts spotlight on doubles, and I think most people will argue this is a lot of fun to watch. You're seeing here, you have the point of the stars. So like Alcaraz obviously is playing in this match, in the match with the Netherlands and Spain that I watched. It was Rafa's last team match. Rafa played the
Yeah.
singles match, lost that, and then he had Alcaraz. They had Alcaraz and Granollers in the doubles. I
In the
thought that was a
doubles.
missed
Yeah.
opportunity of doing Nadal Alcaraz, and you saved Nadal to the doubles. but
Yeah.
but you see like the that brings out a lot of interest, and it's a lot of dynamics of with different chemistries and stuff like that. What's your thoughts around like the personal chemistry in doubles, and is there an issue sometimes when people change teams too much? Like you have the Bryan brothers, they're like a brand of themselves, like themselves, and then you have people who mix too much. Like it's like, okay, now Pavic plays this guy, and then they play that guy, and then that becomes a little bit tough to keep up with as a general viewer, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the chemistry is super important. You see teams like the Bryan brothers, Rajiv Ram and Joe Salisbury played together for 5 or 6 years. They split up at the end of this year, but they had a really good long run. Um, and it definitely matters. I feel like I actually talked yesterday on the podcast that's going to be coming out tomorrow with Nate Lamons, who's number 19 in the world right now, and made the semifinals of the U.S. Open, and he's been playing with Jackson Withrow for 3 consecutive seasons now, and they'll be partnering up again next year. And I asked him this, does it help you early in the season when all these other teams are trying to kind of get a feel for their partner and build up that chemistry. And he said he thinks that it does. So I feel like early in the season it matters a lot. Later in the season, some of that chemistry is built, even with maybe a new partnership, after you've had several months and 10, 15 tournaments together. I feel like it's maybe a bit less of a factor. And I also think that is something, I don't know an easy way to do it. I haven't heard of a good way to do it, but something that the tours could look at to try to incentivize teams to stick together a bit more, because it does make it more fun as a fan. Like, Cabal and Farah, the Colombians, who are retired now, but they um, won the U.S. Open, and they would always have huge Colombian crowds in New York. So I think just having a team that sticks together can build their kind of own fan base, especially if they're from the same country.
Yeah, I think it must be important, like partly the chemistry, because you see that with coaches, for example, like even if you're in singles and you have a bad coaching relationship, you see it like bad results, So it must be even worse when you're actually playing with the person. If you're not understanding each other properly on the court, there's misunderstandings. It's just like not the best vibe that it could be. And then if you're
Yeah.
you're kind of reading each other's minds, like the Bryan brothers were doing, like you can see how much that helps when you're playing a
Hmm.
game. You know,
Yeah, it's something that I've like studied more the last kind of 2 years, because I'm very like analytical. Like I'm thinking, like I majored in math at my college, so I'm more, what do they call that, left brain, I think. And I've talked with Rajiv Ram probably about this the most, on the podcast, so people can listen to it if they want to. But his partnership with Joe Salisbury, some of that, when I ask him like what's the key to like a good doubles partnership, what's the key to you and Joe's success over the years, he's never talking about chemistry in terms of like tactics or strategy. He's always talking about kind of the emotional side and the mental side. Like, I feel one of the things he told me that really resonated with me a year or so ago was he said he feels like he can, if he's having a bad day, he's able to let Joe know, and Joe will pick him up a bit. Whereas early on in the partnership, he may not have done that. He may have kept that to himself. And I think a lot of the reason tennis players struggle with that is because most of us grow up playing singles, and we're all like, you know, internalize everything, because you have to on the singles court. You have to figure everything out on your own. And then all of a sudden, if you're now a professional doubles player, you've got somebody else you can rely on, and you've got to learn how to do that and really like be open with them. So that's been kind of an interesting topic of conversation that I've learned a lot more about over the last couple of years, and I think it's probably the most important part of team chemistry in doubles.
yeah, it's an interesting insight. It's like being able to that you are able to interview these guys must also teach you a lot from what they're saying, because
Mm,
like having a podcast where you interview ATP top 10 singles players or top 20 singles players, that's almost impossible or very difficult, because they like very guarded with their time, guarded with their answers, while it seems like the doubles guys are a little bit more open minded and ready to talk. Is that your feeling as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think they like what I'm doing as well. Like, I'm trying to promote. I created T-shirts that say "Watch more doubles," like, so they're gonna like that. They want people to watch more doubles. So I feel like, yeah, 100%. Like, they're not. If you look at their social media following or whatever, like, there's a handful of doubles players with over 100,000, like Bethany Maddox Sands and maybe a few others. It's more difficult, of course, with the doubles players who also play singles. So like, Siniakova is a good example. Like, she's not a top singles player, but she's top 60 ish, and she's harder to get a hold of and get on the podcast than somebody like Austin Krajicek or Nicole Melchor Martinez or Gabby Dabrowski. They're just not quite as popular because doubles just isn't quite as popular.
How do you see mixed doubles? Like that's a very interesting format when we get to like there's the United Cup at the start of the year, which is not many weeks away now. Like and they do mixed doubles there, I think, in the third and final match. And that's an interesting format because like tennis is a game where obviously like the WTA players they don't hit as hard or can compete with the men's like one on one, but it adds an interesting and kind of a nice, way of illustrating the sport when you can play like in teams together, and it can still be an interesting match, right? So, what's your feeling
Hmm.
around mixed doubles?
Yeah, I think that it's in like an untapped resource for the tours. I think it could become, if they do things right over the next, say, 10 or 20 years, I think it could become a very, very popular side of tennis because I think it might be the only sport in the world where you can have men and women on the same court or field or whatever it is, competing at the highest level. So it's a very entertaining sport to watch, and it works too. Like it's proven when at some of these events like United Cup, when you have like Iga playing with Hurkacz or um, Serena playing with whoever she played with several years ago. I feel like it adds just a different element to the sport. They experimented with it at Indian Wells this year. Week two, it seemed like very kind of last minute. They announced it, I think, Monday, week two. It was an 8-team tournament, invitation only. Uh, or no, players could submit their name and then they were chosen by some committee. And they did quarters Tuesday, semis Wednesday, finals Thursday. It was not televised at all, I don't believe, but it was that week two of those Masters 1000s, like where there's only 2 courts being used. You have a full week, and there's just not much going on the outside courts. Maybe a couple of practices. So it was an opportunity for them to try that out. And I was on the men's and women's doubles court, so I didn't have a chance to go watch the mixed. But I talked to some players who said they got decent crowds, and they felt like it was a pretty good experiment, and it was a good opportunity for them to make a little bit of extra money during that second week when they don't want to go all the way back to Europe before they go back to Miami. So it made a lot of sense there. But I think mixed has a lot of potential overall if they can kind of find a way to fit it into more tournaments.
Yeah, I think that's a concept. That's why I asked. Like, I think it's a concept that is kind of untapped as well. Because if you look at, they're
Mhm.
trying different things in tennis. Like sometimes, I mean, tennis is a very traditional sport. I think we're suffering sometimes from being a very traditional sport. And but we're seeing like, okay, Moratoglu, he has the UTS. He's testing that. That's a kind of strange format, but it seems to interest some people, and it's fun to see them try things, right? And then we have
Mhm.
like the next gen finals that they try a few rule changes. It's 5 sets to 4 games, and they have everything is there no line calling. Everything's automated. Blah 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 blah, and some other rule changes. And the on court coaching is another thing that's interesting that they're trying more of and gonna allow now, I guess, from 2025. But I think they could have like put in like some could be exhibitions for now, like mixed doubles tournaments in these kind of formats with decent prize money, because I'm sure you can get sponsored for that. Like if it's like the Titans mixed doubles, blah blah blah, and you throw a good number of
Yeah.
money on it. Because I think being the only sport that we're both recalling that actually has like men and women competing on equal terms, I mean, it could be a huge thing for like in today's time, right? To talk about and to advertise. But I feel like they're just missing the ball completely on this. It's just like it's a
Mhm.
huge thing to kind of push outside tennis as well. So for me, it's a
Yeah.
bit strange.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I interviewed Matt Ebden at Indian Wells, and he's on the Players Council this year. I'm not sure if he's on next year. I think he's on again next year as well because I think it's a 2-year term. But he he's been kind of advocating for a lot of these rule changes and doubles that you've seen. Like at Madrid, they allowed free fan movement for the first time, and then like shortened the changeovers and made a few other rule changes. I think they started it a bit later so that singles players who lost in the first or second round in Madrid could enter the doubles draw to try to kind of, I guess, boost some of the popularity of the players in the draw. But I talked with Matt Ebden about mixed specifically because he was in that mixed tournament at Indian Wells, and he said the same thing. He was like, today with um, in today's time, like with all the equality and push to make women's sports more popular, which is a great thing. Like mixed doubles can be a part of that, and it can help that. And I think if tennis will be more willing to experiment, which I feel like they were this year, um, I think it just needs to move a little faster, in my opinion. But there's so many disconnected organizations. I know it's kind of hard, but they started to more this year, and I think if they can continue that, they'll find a really good place for mixed doubles.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be done there, and but you need to move fast. Like things move quickly, and if tennis are losing some audience, like this is a good time as any to strike, right?
Yeah.
Well, how do you see like the game of doubles like having evolved? If we go back 10, 15 years, it might be faster, I'm guessing. Like, what are there other things? Like, I mean, in singles, like you talked about, doing data analysis, using kind of different metrics to figure out strategies and stuff is becoming more like commonplace now. Like you're paying some analysis to kind of do some analytics on what you should do to win. What has
Mhm.
changed in doubles?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is the serve and volleys happening a lot less. On the women's tour, I think there's maybe two players who do it, only one on a consistent basis, Luisa Stefani. Um, Other players do it like periodically, but not regularly. And then on the men's tour, I think it's down around like 50% of the men's doubles tour is serving and volleying now. So almost half are staying back. It's somewhere in that like 40 to 60 range. Louis Caillet has the number exactly, but I think that's the big thing. And I think a lot of it, I mean, you'll know more about this than me, but a lot of it is due to the string technology. I think when Luxilon came out, the returns were all of a sudden became like a lot more difficult to hit that first volley from down low because the ball is going to have so much more topspin on it, and it's just it makes the first volley tough. So you're kind of on defense after that first volley, or you're just missing the first volley altogether. So a lot more players are serving and staying back. Players, the servers partners playing a lot tighter to the net than they used to, especially on the men's side. So that's bringing the lob return back. In a lot of my analysis this year with pro teams, whether it's at the Olympics or US Open or Davis Cup, I'm studying these other teams and I'm noticing, they're crashing the net really hard when they are in the server's partner position. So the lob is almost the only play, the lob return, almost the only play you can do reliably on a consistent basis. Like, sure, you can rip a winner past that net player, but it's such a low percentage shot. And a lot of the guys have such large wingspans up there at the net. It's just hard to get the ball by them. So that lob return has started to come back as kind of a counter move to that server's partner playing so close to the net. A lot more two back, I feel like, on the return team as well, playing a bit more defensively. Not every team does this, but a lot of teams are so good from the baseline. You see Max Purcell and Jordan Thompson do it, who are both good singles players as well. They play a lot of two back on return, and they won the U.S. Open, so something's working there for them as well. So I think those are the big changes, but the string technology is definitely the most impactful, I'd say, over the last like 20 years or so.
Yeah, it seems like it's changed the game. Like, because players can now hit, like they can rip the ball so hard and it still dips in, And you said that
Hmm.
when I've watched doubles live, which I've done several times this year, and you're seeing the players, as you mentioned, like they're so close and they just angle, like they put it's almost like a paddle volley, right? Like they just bash it
Yeah.
away. So if
They
you
don't do
don't,
anything with their racket. They just like put their racket in the way.
yeah, yeah, just put the racket in the way at like a short angle, and the ball is gone.
Yeah.
Like that. That's just, and it looks really cool because you have to have anticipation skills of like a maestro to really be able to partly read the incoming ball, but be really ready for it to just angle it away. So like you said, I noticed the doubles. In doubles you do the lob return. That's becoming a little bit more, and you have to do it because otherwise, like you cannot rip it on the player because they're too good at the net. Like everybody's too good now.
Yeah.
So the game seems to have like sped up quite a bit. Like it seems like you need to have faster hands. You need to be everything faster, pretty much. To
Hmm.
react. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's different for the men's and women's side are both a little bit different. Like the women's side, some players aren't playing quite as close to the net. Some of them are for sure, but I feel like on the men's side, it's almost every single good team is that server's partner is just right on top of the net. And maybe that's because the returns are slightly better on the women's side. The wingspan isn't quite as long, so they can't cover as much of that net. And the serves aren't quite as big, so it's easier to hit that return past that net player. There's probably a lot of different factors at play there.
When you're, I mean, you obviously have to study doubles and you watch a lot of doubles, I assume, right? Like where can you access all the doubles matches? Is that as easy as the singles? Like I know Tennis TV, which is what I'm subscribed to. That's from the ATP service. But I don't know what, like, is the coverage good from Tennis Channel, for example, in the States when it comes to watching doubles?
Yeah, Tennis Channel Plus is pretty good. So you pay, I think they just changed it to like a monthly subscription, so you can do, I think, $9.99 a month. So the nice thing about that is you can sign up if you want to watch like Indian Wells and Miami, and then just cancel the next month if you're, just want to watch doubles for those two tournaments. Whereas before it was you had to pay like $100 for the year. So I've got subscriptions to Tennis Channel Plus, Tennis TV. Also, if you're not in the States, WTA TV is good to watch the WTA side. I think those are the big ones. I know some other countries have their own kind of partnerships and subscriptions. And it's gotten better. I think for the most part, you can find with one of these subscriptions, you can find the majority of the doubles matches. A lot of times, at least in the States, Tennis Channel Plus doesn't have all the ATP matches. So you have to go over to ATP TV or Tennis TV for that. But it's gotten better, and hopefully it'll continue to do so.
Is it possible to get like to watch Challenger doubles as well on the Challenger? Because I mean, tennis ATP website they do offer like singles Challenger. Don't know if they offer like doubles in that sense.
I don't know. I don't watch a lot of challengers. I think that they do though, because I remember talking with somebody on the podcast in the last couple years who said that their challenger doubles matches are easier for their family to watch than the 250 level ones, because a lot of the 250s on the ATP side are not streamed online, so you can't. There's just no way to watch them. I don't know if that's changed recently. I know some stuff like some TV coverage things have changed over the last year, so it's hard to keep up with. But I believe challengers are available.
Yeah, I think so. Prize money is an interesting topic because prize money is a topic for futures, challengers, ATP, of course, but in doubles, there's far less prize money because of what we mentioned before, marketing, etc. So how much is that a topic for the players, and to think about, and how difficult is it for them to make a living as a doubles player?
Yeah, I mean it's tough. So they're making on average around like 10 to 12% of a singles player. So the doubles for any given tournament, the doubles prize money is around like 20 to 25% of the singles prize money, but you're splitting that with your partner. So it's about 1/10 of a singles player, uh, and it's difficult. I mean, that's why you see these doubles players playing 30, sometimes more tournaments in a year, and a lot of the singles players can get away with 18 or 20 or so, especially at the top of the game. Uh, but I feel like the tours, um, again, it's the chicken or the egg problem. Like the tours don't want to invest prize money into something that's not making them money. But I contend if they would invest in marketing, then it might become more popular and they could get better sponsorship deals and so on. So I know it's tough. And then, of course, they also have to think about as a pro athlete, your career is like 10, 15 years maybe. So you have to save money for, you know, after you turn 35 or 40, or in Rohan Bopana's case, 44 or 45. So yeah, prize money is certainly a huge issue, and it's difficult to really make it in doubles in terms of prize money.
Yeah, it must be. It must be challenging because I mean, that's always the talk about the different prize money and that like as a tennis player you're self-employed, right? So you have to pay all your expenses. I mean, sometimes you get the hotel and stuff, but maybe you have a coach, and you have other expenses, travel and whatnot. So it's not an easy
It's
lifestyle.
crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. I talk with several doubles players from the States, and I'm sure you've heard this from singles players as well, like they have to file taxes in every single state that they win prize money. So it's like they obviously have to pay an accountant to figure all this stuff out. Like, I don't know, there's just all these extra expenses that you have as a pro athlete that you don't think about, for somebody like me who's working behind my laptop for like 30 plus hours a week. So, um, yeah, it's difficult for sure.
Yeah, it's a very complicated lifestyle. I mean, they love it, but still, it's like it's not that easy to comparing to other sports, especially like and now doubles is a team sport. I mean, if you look at other large team sports, they're making loads and loads much more money, right? And then things are covered by the organization. Where here you'll have two self-employed people teaming up to
Hmm.
to struggle around on the tour. So kudos to them for doing it.
Hmm.
And when it comes to like the coaching topic, like on-court coaching, what's your kind of personal stance? From what I know, they're trying it next year, right? Like, so do you think coaching is it should be solved by the team? In this case, they can coach each other, of course. So it's a little bit different in doubles, but what's your feeling on the on-court
Yeah.
coaching topic?
Yeah. Well, they've allowed it, the past year or so, if they're like on the same side as you, I
Yeah.
believe. I think that's how it's been. And then on changeovers, you're allowed to talk to them. They're actually allowed to walk over if the opponents, take a restroom break. Uh, so I'm of the opinion I'm fine with on-court coaching. What I don't like is how they had it before, where like you could have a coaching box, but they're not allowed to coach. Um, I was like, either allow them to coach or don't allow them into the stadium. Like, why are you tempting them and like putting them in the front row, like in very short eyesight of the player and telling them don't coach? Like, of course they're going to try to coach. So like, do one or the other. Either like have them sit back in the locker room where there's no access to communication with the player, or just allow the coaching. Um, I'd be fine with either. I kind of like on court coaching because I've sat in the player's box a few times and been able to kind of help strategically, throughout matches, and hope to continue to do that in the future. And that's obviously where I can provide value. So I'd prefer to see it go that way. But yeah, I think I'd be fine with either one. And it seems like it's trending towards the on court coaching, anyways.
Yeah, I I can understand the argument for like I know Fritz is one of those guys talking like loudly against it, saying like this is a problem solver sport. We're supposed to be solving the issues that's happening on the court ourselves. But on the other hand, if you want to make tennis a more engaging sport to watch, which I think is generally a problem, like also live because you go to ATP 250s the first couple of days, it's pretty empty there. You know, like it feels a bit like a hollow thing, right? And then by quarterfinals starts filling up a little bit, but still like they need to sell more tickets. And one way is to obviously, at least on TV, like to have it more engaging that you see, okay, the coach is adding strategy. Maybe the commentators can then talk about the strategy. People get a bit more insight because I think the more you know about game, the more interesting it is. So I think
Hmm.
like you need the audience to understand some concepts of tennis to actually make it more interesting. Otherwise, it looks like pong, right? Like once hit left, right, left, right, left, right. It's you have to understand like why is he hitting left, right, or right, right, right
Yeah.
if you have one on the backhand. So it's like it's something that I think we need to think about it on a bigger scale than just like it's a problem solving game. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're seeing like in other sports, I forget the names of the softwares, but like people can sit at home and watch like a basketball game or something and commentate on it, and then other people can, tune into like that stream. I've done this on YouTube Live with a few doubles matches this year with Talking Tennis, and people like it. And I think eventually we'll get to a world where you can tune into, a doubles match or a singles match or Grand Slam final or whatever, and you can choose your, commentators. So like if I'm tuning into a doubles match and I want a lot of strategy, I'll go with Renee Stubbs. If I want like a lot of, emotion and like, I don't know, whatever the other options are, like I can choose somebody else. Or, there might be an adult version where they're like cussing the whole time. Who knows? Like, there could be all sorts of different options for each fan, and they can kind of choose their flavor of commentator, for each match. And I think that would be um, a really cool thing to happen eventually. I'm a fan of the strategy side, obviously, so I love listening to Renee Stubbs talk about the different angles, the court, the shot selection, and all that stuff. So hopefully we'll move towards that direction here soon.
Yeah, I can just relate it to chess, having been a chess player before. Like it's now there's a world championship match, and now chess is growing like crazy on YouTube and overall, right? People are interested in chess, which is kind of the first time it's been on that level, thanks to the internet, maybe thanks to COVID partly. But you know you can't really watch chess with a limited understanding unless you have great commentators. So it's like so important that
Hmm.
you relay why is this happening, like why is he hitting this shot, what is his strengths and weaknesses, and what are they trying to do. And sometimes I feel like the commentators fail in tennis to do more than just tell what happened. Like, oh, he hit the forehand in the corner and then he went in for a volley, hit it back in the other corner. Okay, I saw that. So what? Why is this happening? And what's the strategy? What's the trends? You know, like discuss trying to open up the box a bit more on what's happening. You know, and break it down
Hmm.
because I think other sports do that pretty well. Like if you're seeing like well produced other sports, they're pretty good at like maybe over analyzing even every single little thing. You know, while tennis maybe steps back a bit and doesn't do anything really.
Yeah, yeah. The It seems like the TV experience in tennis just hasn't changed much in the last like 25 years or so. Whereas other sports, it's changed dramatically. So I think it's something that's definitely an opportunity, and I think we will see it change, just like with the internet and the streaming, the ability for people to like call matches from their home and stream. I think that's just going to become more popular, and the best commentators will rise to the top, regardless of if they played on the pro tour and won 5 grand slams, or if they're somebody like me who played division 3 tennis and you know doesn't have a professional background.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of doing it, like more audience focused, right? When it comes to like the rules, like so doubles, they've been trying to shorten everything, like pretty quick, like really speed up the game. In between like points, maybe bring some audience interaction. Like tennis is a sport that's always supposed to be silent, but if it you look at it from outside, if you were an alien and you looked at football and you looked at NBA and you looked at then tennis, you're like, what's going on here? Why they're so quiet in this sport? Like, is this the most boring sport ever?
Yeah,
Like, you're sending a weird signal, right? Sorry. What's your take there? Like, what could are the rules good now as they are? Could something be changed in the format? What do you
yeah,
think about like audience being allowed to be loud and move around?
yeah, yeah. I spoke with Matt Ebden about this at Indian Wells, and he said we want to make tennis, we want to make doubles the party atmosphere. So I I don't know if I want it to be like a sideshow. I think it should be taken very seriously. I think there's a market for it to be a proper professional sport that is popular by itself, and still complement singles for sure. Uh, I am a huge fan of free fan movement. I hate the idea that when I go to the U.S. Open, if I bring a friend who has never been to a tennis match before, they have to sit outside the gate and wait for 20 minutes for the next changeover. If it's like love all in the second set or something, it just creates such a bad experience. And they're probably, we probably just missed our opportunity to bring that person in as a tennis fan because they're um, just fed up with like having to wait in lines and stuff like that, and they can't go out to get their next honey deuce whenever they want and pop back in. So I think we've got to make the fan experience better that way. So free fan movement's great. Music like in between the points and in between games, I think is cool. Allow people to talk. I think that's fine. Um, I don't really I don't know about like player fan interaction like during the matches. I don't think I'm a fan of that as much. Miking up players is something that they tested in DC this year. Harry Heliovara had some really entertaining clips kind of go viral on social media, and I think that could be cool too, for sure. Nate Lamons told me yesterday he was in DC and they did it with him as well, but he didn't like the mic was too big on his back, the receiver. So they've got to solve that somehow. But I'm just a fan of like innovation with this stuff because the singles tour is going to be like very hesitant to make a lot of these changes. So doubles can be kind of an experimenting ground. And I think doubles should absolutely just take advantage of that as much as possible. And, if my friend who I bring to the US Open for the first time comes in there and they hear the music going on over on the doubles court and they're allowed to go in and out whenever they want, and they're allowed to talk during the point, they're going to be like, oh, I don't really care to watch the singles. I want to go back over to the doubles because that's more fun, So I think doubles should take advantage of that and embrace it.
Yeah, and you can go back not that far, and they go like to the Australian Open, I think 22, when Kyrgios played with Kokkinakis, and like
Mm-hmm.
in the final, and they won the tournament. But it was like insane atmosphere. Like the atmosphere was probably better at that doubles match than in obviously there's home players, but still like than in any other match on the whole event, singles included, right? Because they riled up the crowd. The crowd was like drinking beer. They were having fun. It was like a football game. And as a
Yeah.
tennis fan and a fan of the game growing, I think this was like tennis at its best. Like when you really show like this is the kind of engagement we want to bring to the sport, make it more like other sports because they are trying to perfect the audience. It's an entertainment thing anyway, right? Like I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people forget like this is without the crowd, without the audience, nobody's paying you anything, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
what we're selling here. We're selling entertainment. So I think this should be used more, like or looked at more. Like how do we bring this type of vibe to the sport?
Yeah. Yeah. Curious is such an interesting, not just for doubles, but like tennis overall is such an interesting example because I feel like, and I don't have a good answer to this. I haven't studied other sports super closely, but I feel like him being kind of polarizing can be a good thing for the sport. I think one potential, I don't know, it's a good thing and a bad thing, right? Like when you look at the WTA, like all those top 10 players, like they're all friends with each other. Like they're all really nice to each other. And that's a good thing. Like you want to be kind and be good people. But also it was a good thing when like, you had those rivalries like back in the 2000s between like Serena and Maria Sharapova and like I don't know, just in other sports you see like a little bit more kind of trash talk between rivals and different things like that. And I don't know, I feel like that can be a good thing with some type of governor on it. Like you don't want it out of control, but I think some of that polarization and kind of creating those rivalries within the sport can be a really good thing as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes you need these hotheads, right? Like I mean, we have Kyrgios now. Bublik is pretty good at breaking rackets. There's some guys who get a bit more angry
Yeah.
than others. But I think that controlled aggro, like not maybe throwing rackets so that like you risk some ball boy or whatever, like has happened.
Yeah.
Uh, but bringing some kind of trash talk doesn't have to be that bad. But if you look at McEnroe, for example, people loved watching him. Some hated him, but like it was a good watch, right? You don't know what's gonna happen.
Hmm.
He's gonna bring some engagement, some entertainment, and we
Yeah.
need we need some players like that. Not everyone will be like that naturally, but we need some players to have more of a personality because otherwise the sport is just like two robots who's like hitting
Hmm.
hard ground strokes and
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. You just have to figure out like where that line is, right? Like Zverev has obviously crossed the line a few times with like smashing the umpire chair and things like that. But to smash your racket on the baseline, in anger because you missed a shot, like I don't know, for me, like that doesn't hurt anybody. And if like a parent is listening and saying like, oh, that's a bad influence on my kid, like I don't know. I'm of the like I don't have kids, but I'm of the opinion like your kid shouldn't be looking to like Nick Kyrgios for guidance. Like your kid should be looking to you for guidance. So like I don't know. I think that's more of a parenting problem than anything else. But anyways,
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I agree. I think that's more up to the parent, and we will always be people who are maybe not the best role models, but that's where you have to go step in and say this is not a good role model. That's up to you.
hmm
But in terms of the rules, like now it's a lot of like match tiebreak, right? So it's two sets, match tiebreak. Are you in favor of going even further in shortening? Should it go back to longer formats like Grand Slams? I mean, that's the three sets
yeah.
stuff, but where are you in this kind of how the format of doubles is right now?
So I like the So when they played World Team Tennis, which they're not doing anymore, I like those sets. They're first to five, and these are pretty radical transformations, but they're first to five. It's a tiebreak at 4-all. The tiebreaker is, I think it was a 9-point tiebreaker, win by one. So it's first to five. So you can win the tiebreaker 5-4. The reason I like that is if you win a set 5-3, for example, everybody served twice, right? Um, Whereas right now, if you win a set 6-4, you've had two players, one on each team, who's served three times, which makes it kind of imbalanced. So I like that, and I would switch to that. I would keep no ad, and I would go a full third set rather than the 10-point tiebreaker. So if you gave me the power to change it tomorrow, that's what I would do. I would do sets to five, tiebreak at 4-all. It's a 9-point tiebreaker, no ad, full third set. Players I've talked to don't, a lot of them don't mind the 10-point tiebreaker for the third with the current format. The thing that kills them is the no ad. And this isn't an issue at the majors. So the majors still have with ad, they have a full third. But all the Masters 1000s and every other tournament is no ad, 10-point tiebreaker for the third. And the no ad makes it really difficult because, you're down 30-40 and it's double break point. Like that's really, really hard. Whereas if you're down 30-40 and it's with ad, you get that point and you're back to deuce. And now you've got a little bit of wiggle room to lose a point. So I think that's probably if I were to make a small change, I would get rid of the no ad. But big changes, I would switch to that World Team Tennis format and actually keep no ad, but make it a full third.
Yeah. I don't like the no ad at all. I think I think the ad is one of the things in tennis scoring that kind of adds intrigue. Like, and it doesn't, like, there are a few games that are gonna be like 10 juices, you know. So I think it adds a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. And like you said, I've played with no ad as well. Like, it's like 30-40, you don't want to be down 2 break points. It's like there's something wrong with that, you know. Like it's like in a
Mm-hmm.
love 40, you're down 4 break points. So it's you
Yeah.
like that you're getting to juice. That's kind of like a haven now. Like, you stop a bit, you can breathe, and then you have to win 2 points. I like that way, but I do agree
Yeah.
that at some point I think we have to shorten the sets, and also in singles, like maybe play like what they do in the next gen finals. I'm even open to doing like 5 sets, but to like 4, like they do in the next
Yeah.
gen. I think that's great
Yeah.
because then you have that seesaw effect of the storyline a 5 set match can break. Like, oh, he won 2 sets 4-1, and then he lost like 3 in a row, right? You can get back. And while the current
Mm-hmm.
format can sometimes feel like long, but still, like, it's only 3 sets, so it's like a tough. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
definitely experiment.
Well, the nice thing about that, you're still winning the same number of games, right? So
Yeah.
you have to win 3 sets to 4, which is 12 games, or 2 out of 3 to 6. 2 sets to 6 is 12 games. So you're kind of spreading out those games over more sets, which will create more big points, which is more entertaining. And it also gets rid of those kind of throwaway games, which happen probably most often on the men's doubles tour. When if a team gets up 4-1 double break, like the set's over. Like you're not getting 2 breaks back in the next like several games. So there you're just wasting your time over the next 4 games, like when you already know the set's over. Whereas if we're playing this fast four format, the 4-1 set's over. Now we're back at 0-0. So I'm a huge fan of that, just to get rid of some of that kind of dead time when a player gets up a double break early in a set.
Yeah, and I think like one way you could approach that, if we look at the whole tour, is that you could play 5 sets in a Grand Slam to 4, even on the women's side, right? Like, technically, you could even start
Yeah.
like doing 5 sets. Everybody plays the same amount of sets. You don't have this discussion about like equal pay, blah blah blah, for equal work, etc., which is always like some argumentation back and forth. And everybody
Mm-hmm.
plays the same. It's always 5 sets. We play to 4. There's ad, and that's it. Like, there's juices. So it's like that would be. There are a few things. I know it's a huge change in Wimbledon. Like, they will rot in their
Yeah.
graves before they change anything. But I think as a sport, the more you watch, the more you're involved in tennis, the more you see like room and maybe necessity for change, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. We're just resistant to change as a sport for some reason, more than other sports, I guess. So I think it will change eventually, though.
Yeah, I think it's a resistance thing for sure, you know. So we did a video which was very funny, I thought, to do, where you talked about the best racket for doubles, which is one of those questions that is impossible to answer because there is no best racket for anything. It's about like your playing style and what you feel comfortable with, and there's obviously like some help in a larger racket heads, etc., etc. But you made like a serious video where you talked about the Big Bubba, which is a 137 square inch racket, and it was all made in jest and in good humor. But then some people were like, "Oh, is this really the best racket ever? Oh, I have to go get one," which is now sadly discontinued. Do you get these questions like, "What's the best racket for my doubles game?" and stuff like that?
Yeah, I get a lot of questions like that. Even with like strategy, people will ask me uh, like, is it better to serve and volley or serve and stay back? It's like, well, it depends. Like, so yeah, tons of questions like that. There's so many factors that go into double strategy. There's so many factors that go into a tennis racket. Um, to in making that decision on like what is the best strategy, what is the best racket for you. You really have to think about it from a lot of different angles to make a good decision. And I think that's one of the things that I love about double strategy and that probably you love about tennis rackets is that there's just an infinite amount of possibilities that you can do on the court or do with your racket to like set up, to add power or add feel or add spin or add control. So yeah, I get these questions a lot. People want a, I guess, quick fix for their doubles game or for their top spin forehand or whatever. And unfortunately, there's not one. So you have to do the hard work of kind of diving in and testing and experimenting to figure out what works best.
Yeah, I think the internet kind of encourages easy answers where there are none, right? Like, so everybody wants like the
Hmm.
easy answer. Give me 3 tips so I can hit this one-handed backhand, or give me one racket that allows me to not have any mishits at the net, when I'm getting attacked, right? It's like
Hmm.
sadly there are no easy answers in life, so there are no like one easy quick fix solution, which is what everybody's always looking for, right? But talk
Hmm.
about like content. Like, what's been your experience and like the good and the bad of being like a content creator? I mean, you're working a lot in front of the computer, you're doing a podcast, it's a free job, but it's also comes with a lot of like responsibility in a way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the hardest part is for me is that I'm most of the week I'm by myself working. So I think just like anybody who's running their own business or doing their own thing, like you struggle with kind of self doubt sometimes, like, oh, is this the right thing? Or nobody commented on this last video, like maybe I didn't do a good job with it. But then every now and then, and especially like this past week when I launched the membership, like I get emails from people saying like, "Hey, I've listened to your podcast for a long time. It's helped my doubles game so much. My my opponent's comments on how good my volleys have gotten because of this lesson or whatever it is." And like that really makes you feel good and makes you feel like you're having an impact and kind of motivates you to move forward and continue to do what you're doing. So I feel like just for my own like mental health to just to focus on that and like really read through like the testimonials that people have given me, unsolicited testimonials. Like I'm not asking people to email me this stuff. um, I think focusing on that, keeps me in a good state of mind. It helps me realize that I am helping people become better at doubles, and they seem to be getting a lot of value out of the podcast, out of the video lessons, out of the newsletter, and yeah, it just kind of keeps you going.
Yeah, I think like really putting more focus on the positive, and it's so easy to get like one troll can put off your day like a little bit, but it's if you really think about all the good feedback you're getting, I think it makes life a little bit easier and more, you get more inspired to do better work, really, right?
Yeah, the trolls like don't bother me as much. I think they're kind of entertaining.
Same.
So when I get a coach who will like point out why like that lob return lesson that I just did like would never work at the club level or whatever, like I just engage with them, which not in a negative way, and I'm not arguing with them. I like kind of I tell them like, oh well, did like maybe you're right, did you think of this? Like I try to like kill them with kindness, I guess. um Honestly, the weeks or days when I'm like a little bit less motivated and a little more down is when I'm not getting like any engagement on the content. And it shouldn't be a metric that I'm like focused on. I should really just focus on creating what I think is good content, and the results will follow. But I mean, you can't help it. Like I have to log into the Instagram account and try to reply to the comments because it's good for the algorithm, and I want to track the number of likes and views on the videos so that I know what's resonating, so that I can create more content that people are watching and want to see. So it's impossible to kind of get out of that, but you have to, I don't know, approach it with the healthiest mindset that you can.
Yeah, I think that's wise words. When it comes to like doubles, like what are some typical issues you see? I mean, this is probably a common question, but typical issues you see like, on the club player, like from a intermediate to advanced, like what like a typical issue or a few typical issues you're seeing that people are could just improve or just be more mindful of? Because like I
Yeah.
mean, I've played some ITF seniors, masters, doubles tournaments, and I've been lucky to have good partners, so I won all my doubles tournaments. But that's not because of me, because I am not good at doubles, so I would need some help as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the biggest problem is, or one of the biggest problems is people try to cover their half of the court. So, if you're at the net or you're at the baseline, you think, okay, if it comes to my half, it's mine. If it comes to their half, it's theirs. And that's like not at all how good doubles is played. If you watch the pro players, like they're constantly crossing and switching behind each other and communicating and moving forward and backwards. So it's really like an art, the way good doubles is played. Uh, that one of the biggest issues is for net players covering the alley too much. I'm sure you've heard it 100 times. Everybody's heard it 100 times, but they still do it, and that becomes kind of a psychological thing. Jonathan Stokey, who runs a podcast called the Baseline Intelligence Podcast, just put out a Instagram video where he had a D1 player at Duke returning down the line and trying to hit the doubles alley. And this D1 player makes two in the doubles alley. He misses three returns, and then the other five are in the singles court. I think I have that right. It's something close to that. So he's making 2 out of 10 in the doubles alley, yet a lot of us are covering the doubles alley when our partner's serving, especially. So it's just not an area of the court that many balls go to. You're better served kind of moving towards the middle when you're at the net, especially when your partner has a first serve. So I think net play is the area that people struggle most because so many of us grow up playing from the baseline, playing singles. Uh, so I think that's an area, if you're gonna start to focus on double strategy, maybe start with net play, because I would imagine if you're like most people, that's where you have the biggest opportunity for growth.
Yeah, and you can do like I remember I watched this Top Court videos, which is one of the platforms which like coaching stuff, and they had Brian Brothers on there,
Mm-hmm.
and they showed, if I remember this correctly, but they showed a lot of like the drills they did at the net, like which are like insanely difficult drills. But I started trying them with a tennis partner of mine, and it was like it's a lot of fun, and you learn a lot about like how to improve the volley, how to like hit that volley, reaction volleys and stuff like this. So it's like a becomes a game of
Mm-hmm.
its own. So you add another dimension to your tennis, right? So even as a singles player, you can look at doubles and add some extra tips and tricks to your game. So I think it's important to like also play both if you can. Like if you focus on doubles, I
Mm-hmm.
understand, but it to as a singles player, it's good to play a lot of doubles. I would say it helped me quite a
Yeah,
bit.
100%. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it'll make you, feel more confident getting to the net. I feel like if you're a singles player and you want to beat people who are better than you at singles, uh, like getting to the net is a good strategy if you can kind of teach yourself to do that. This is what I did a few weeks ago in California. We played that singles game, and I knew I could not hang with you or with Delaney from the baseline. So I was like, okay, I'm going to rush the net. And if we played that game 10 times, that might be the only one I win, but I won that game being like the, I don't know, fifth or sixth best person out there from the baseline. But just getting to the net can be a great tactic in singles as well. There's a lot of data on this from Craig O'Shaughnessy, who talks about, this serve and volley. is a tactic that still works in today's game, even though not as many players do it, because the win percentage is just very, very high.
Yeah, there's a lot of like secrets to the data, and like you said when we played that game, which is like an active ball, like you're someone is lobbing a ball over your head, and you're running, so you're already like your heart rate is going, you're trying to orientate yourself into the
Mm-hmm.
rally, and then you have you or, or someone else, but like rushing the net, which can happen in a match. Like you're not ready for it because like it's so rare. Like also on the amateur level that people actually come to rush the net. Like I play these clay court
Mm-hmm.
tournaments in Spain, for example, like UTR or the ITF's Masters, and then there are a few guys who are gonna, especially on a clay court, rush the net. But if you do, even like occasionally, like people are thrown off. They're like, oh, I have to do
Yeah.
something. Normally you
Mm-hmm.
can build a groove, and then some guys they will never miss a backhand or a forehand. They will just be super solid.
Yeah.
But if you get to the net, you can get them out of their comfort zone a little bit. You have to
Mm-hmm.
come up with something. So I think net play, we can't lose the art form of like having grown up with Stefan Edberg for sure. Like I love a good volley. Like it's an art in itself to hit like a really nice solid volley,
Yeah.
right?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, another like a misconception is that you have to have good volleys to get to the net. Like it's just not true. Like if we could probably get the film from Tennis Warehouse of that game. Like if you look at the 11 points that I won to win that game, I went to the net on probably every one of them. Maybe it was like 10 out of 11. I bet I only hit two volley winners. Um, I probably didn't even have to hit a volley on like three or four of those points because I just got to the net. The opponent feels that pressure and they go for a smaller target. They swing a little bit harder to get it past me. They try to lob me and miss it long. You just force so many errors by getting to the net, even if your volleys aren't that good. And a lot of the volleys I hit were probably not very clean volleys, but just by being at the net, you're just applying so much pressure. And it can put yourself in a winning position in a lot of different scenarios. And it's kind of a risk you have to take if you're playing somebody who's better than you in singles or doubles. Like you've got to take some kind of risk, you know? So I feel like it's a safer risk to take than trying to hit the ball harder with your forehand from the baseline or doing something that's going to be a little bit outside of your skill level.
It's an interesting like approach because like you said with that doubles alley, like people think they usually overestimate their opponent. So like if you rush the net, you get passed once. You're A lot of people like stop their strategy right there. They're like, okay, I got passed once.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is too good.
Yeah.
But they don't see the bigger picture of like if I do it 10 times, how many times will this guy pass me or lob me or
Mm-hmm.
make a difficult volley, right? Like maybe not many. How many times will he hit the top of the net? Maybe more than he is gonna make winners. Like so tennis is a statistics game in many ways. Like you're winning to win a tennis match, you might be winning like 51% of the points. Sometimes you don't even
Yeah.
win more points than your opponent, and you win the match because you win the more important points. But I think people get stuck in this, like, which is like they get completely connected to their emotions and not to what's actually happening on the court.
Exactly. Yeah, our emotions, that's what I was about to say. So our emotions don't line up with these statistics. So when you get passed down the alley in a doubles match, it feels like you just lost 5 points. You let your partner down. You didn't cover the alley, which you're supposed to do, supposedly. It just feels so bad. And the other, typically, what also happens when you get passed down the alley is the opponent screams, "Come on." They're super pumped up because they just hit a winner. So it feels like more than 1 point. But what I've been able to do and what I've been able to help a lot of my audience do is train themselves to understand that that's a low percentage shot. I'm glad they actually passed me down the alley because I know they're going to keep going for it. And I know if they do, they're going to make 1 out of 3 at best. So I'm going to win 2 out of 3 points. And even though they get to yell, "Come on," every third point at the end of the match, I'm going to be winning that match. So I think being able to understand the data and the percentages will help you kind of control your emotions a bit more when you do lose a point in a way that's a little bit embarrassing. The lob return is another good example. Like when you're hitting a lob return off of a first serve, which is a tactic I'm recommending a lot lately, uh, you're not going to win the point in a pretty way. And you might lose the point in a really ugly way. You can leave that lob short and they get an overhead that they hit over the fence. You can miss the lob long, which is embarrassing. If you win the point, you hit a lob return and maybe the opponent misses the serve +1 from the baseline, which is like not that fun of a way to win the point. But when I look at the percentages in a lot against a lot of these doubles teams, against first serve, it's a really great tactic. Even though it's not pretty and you lose a lot of points in a unfun way. Against first serve, you're losing, 60, 65, sometimes 70% of points. But if you can get to 30, 35% returning against first serve, then you're doing a good job. So you just have to understand this data to try to navigate the emotional side of it a little bit better.
Yeah, I think for a lot of players, and I notice this myself, like when you don't play a lot of doubles, you get stressed by the presence of one guy at the net. Like, let's say you're serving. I don't know if you have any data on this, but like how much you usually like I serve probably less good in a doubles match because there's a guy on the like at the net. Like I'm not gonna hit the guy, but you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like it's like it shrinks the court in your head. Like you're still hitting the same spot, same rectangle that you're always doing, but
Yeah.
because there's more people on the court on your side and on the other side, like you feel like the court is smaller. You know, like you have to navigate like a smaller space, even though you have the alleys as well, but not on the serve, of course. And the
Mm-hmm.
same with like return. Like you can't return down the line so easily because then he's gonna hit a volley and you're the point's done and you feel like an idiot even if you try to hit a winner
Mm-hmm.
in the alley or whatever. So I also believe like the lob is something where you actually have more margin than you think to pull it off. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you're hitting a flat shot, like you don't have a lot of margins to play with. Like it's not you can do that obvious cross court, but also if you hit it not enough cross, the guy just steps in and he slaps it, like he poaches it. So
Yeah.
I found the geometry quite interesting in doubles, like how the court shrinks a little bit, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It seems like there's a lot more geometry involved. I feel like, playing through the middle of the court when you're on offense is generally a really good strategy in doubles because you're just taking away so many angles from the opponent to defend. Um, but a lot of this, I mean, there's so many factors. A lot of this depends on how aggressive that opposing net player is. When you're talking about returning, if I'm playing somebody at the net who, plays, several, maybe 5, 6 feet off of the net, and they never poach, well, I can hit my flat return cross court because I know it's going to be fine every time. But if I'm playing a good net player and they're poaching a lot, they're playing close to the net, then I'm going to pick up on that eventually and I'm going to start hitting that lob return. And then maybe they make a counter move and then that opens up the cross court return or whatever it may be. So it's kind of like chess where there's all these counter moves that you can constantly be making. But there's just a lot of factors and a lot at play.
When you work with like a pro team in doubles, like what are they looking to you for? Like they're looking for like key points to win the match. Like I know there might be very
Mm-hmm.
different scenarios, but if like an example or like you're compiling stats like data, how do you do it? Do you sit in
Mm-hmm.
Excel and like try to make up some models on based on like this is the team's weakness that you're facing, etc., etc.
Yeah. Yeah. It all starts with Excel. So I'm running like pivot tables to figure out the best. I'd say like 80% or more is focused on serve and return. Because the average rally length in doubles is 3.2, I think, on the men's side, or 3.3. It's like really low. So serve and return are the most important things there. So uh, I start with Excel. I'm looking at serve and return data based on location. So what is this returner's win percentage when the opponents serve wide to them, serve into their body, and serve down the tee? What is their win percentage against a regular formation versus I formation? Some players really struggle against one versus the other, and there's not a consistent. I think in general, like on average across the tour, I formation is more effective on first serve, but there's plenty of players I've scouted against who are better against first serve, against I formation. So I'll have my team run regular formation the majority of the time, and then running the same kind of calculations on second serve. And then I'm looking for the opponent's serve tendencies. So if they run I formation in the ad court, maybe they're serving T 80% of the time. That's good for our player to know because then they can kind of hedge when they see that I formation. And then from there, once I have all the data, that's when I go to the video, and that's when kind of the science meets the art of it. And I'm looking for little subtle things like, oh, every time this happened, this player moves here, so this shot is open, or when they tend to serve wide in the ad court, the net player does this little thing that you can kind of take advantage of, um, and then I'll send the players videos of each of these serve and return points, so that they can kind of get a feel for how the other team plays as well. Because the data is helpful, but the video is really the most valuable part. The data kind of just gives me a place to start and things to kind of look for within the video. So that's how I generally do a scouting report with the pro players.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Like that must be the most
Yeah.
enjoyable part of your your work, kind of.
Well, the most fun is watching them execute it, for sure. So like it takes me 4 hours or so to put together one report, depending on how much data I have. And then I'll spend 2 hours watching the match and watching. There's some specific matches like over the years that I've watched where it's been like a team that's not necessarily favored, like they're the underdog team, but they implement some of my strategies and they win the match. And that's the most fun part because it's super rewarding. And I'll sit in front of the TV or stream it on my laptop and I'll be like, all right, serve T here, like use I formation, and they'll do it. And it's really cool to see the players execute.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds fun actually. So for 2025, my last question here is like, what's your plans, your goals? You're gonna travel to more tournaments, be more active working with teams. What would you want
Yeah.
to see, for next year?
Yeah, so I'll be in Australia. I booked my flight last week actually, so I'm gonna go down to Australia. My plan over the next month is to I've got a few meetings with some players, and I want to get a dedicated like 2 to maybe 4 players or teams that I work with throughout the year, because I think I can just have a bigger impact that way. Uh, Over the past 2 or 3 years, as I've done this more and more, it's just I'll work with the team for a tournament and then we'll part ways, and I may not work with them again for 6 months. Whereas I feel like if I can kind of track some of their metrics over time from month to month, I can help them develop their game even better, and become more effective, and give them things to work on in practice. So that's something I'm going to focus on over the next month, trying to figure out which players or teams are going to be a good fit for that. And then as far as the strategy for club level players, I'll continue to be doing the podcast, the newsletter, is probably the best way to kind of follow me and keep up with everything that's going on. And then I launched the new membership last week, which includes a monthly members only webinar where I'm going over different strategy. Last month we talked about, or last week I talked about tactics to beat pushers in doubles, which is a very, very popular topic. So that's a lot of fun. So I'll continue to try to grow that membership and provide some premium content there as well. So yeah, a lot going on in 2025. It should be a lot of fun.
Awesome, man. Happy to hear. Hope to see you at some tournaments in the future, Indian Wells or Miami, or hopefully even Australian Open. We'll see what I can work on.
Yeah,
You have a nice one, man.
awesome. Thanks, Jonas.